The danger of judging authority by appearance starts with how quickly the human brain wants shortcuts. We see a face, clothes, posture, tone, and within seconds we decide who holds power and who doesn't. We rarely stop to question those judgments because they feel natural, almost automatic. But that instinct has a flaw. It relies on patterns from our past, stereotypes we've absorbed, and assumptions we've never tested. And when authority doesn't match the image we expect, we tend to dismiss it without realizing what we're doing. Appearance has always been tied to authority in obvious ways. Uniforms, medals, titles on nameplates, even the way someone enters a room all signal who is supposed to be listened to. Over time, we learn to trust those signals more than the person themselves. The problem is that real authority doesn't always come dressed the way we imagine. Some of the most capable leaders look ordinary. Some carry experience they don't advertise. Some learned early that announcing power invites resistance, so they let results speak instead. When we judge authority by appearance, we don't just make harmless mistakes. We reshape how we behave. We interrupt people we think don't matter. We ignore instructions that don't sound important enough. We talk over voices that don't match our mental image of leadership. And often, the person we underestimate is fully aware of it. They notice the glances, the tone changes, the way attention drifts away from them. They've seen it before. They've learned to wait. This kind of misjudgment often feels justified in the moment. We tell ourselves we're being practical. We assume experience must look a certain way. Confidence must sound a certain way. Authority must enter loudly, speak firmly, and take up space. But those assumptions collapse when tested against reality. In high-stakes environments, authority is earned through competence, trust, and accountability, not volume or appearance. The people who carry real responsibility often don't need to prove it to strangers. Judging authority by appearance is especially dangerous because it creates blind spots. We stop listening right when we should pay attention. We overlook warnings, insights, or decisions that could matter later. History is full of moments where someone dismissed the wrong person and paid for it. Not because that person demanded respect, but because they didn't need to. Their role spoke when it mattered, not before. There's also a deeper cost. When people are consistently underestimated, systems lose valuable perspectives. Authority that isn't recognized gets sidelined. Decisions become narrower. Confidence gets mistaken for competence, while actual expertise gets ignored. Over time, this shapes environments where the loudest voices dominate, and the most capable ones learn to stay quiet until they're forced to speak. The irony is that true authority rarely depends on recognition from everyone in the room. It depends on recognition from the right people. A leader's influence is often invisible until a moment reveals it. That's why appearance-based judgments feel safe until they suddenly aren't. One unexpected action can expose how wrong the room has been all along. This pattern shows up everywhere, not just in dramatic situations. In workplaces, classrooms, public spaces, and casual interactions, people decide who matters before anyone speaks. We do it without malice most of the time, but the effect is the same. We confuse familiarity with credibility. We trust confidence even when it's empty. And we doubt quiet presence even when it's backed by years of earned authority. The danger isn't just embarrassment when we're proven wrong. It's the habit itself. The habit of assuming power looks a certain way. The habit of equating visibility with importance. The habit of ignoring what we don't immediately recognize. Once that habit takes hold, it shapes every interaction, every decision, every moment we choose who to listen to and who to dismiss. People who've carried real authority for a long time often stop correcting these assumptions. They've learned that explaining who they are wastes energy. They let time handle it. They let moments reveal truth. And when that truth surfaces, it's rarely gentle. It arrives all at once, leaving everyone else to confront how easily they were fooled by appearances. Quiet confidence versus loud assumptions is a contrast that plays out constantly, often without anyone noticing it in real time. Loud assumptions announce themselves immediately. They speak first, fill the silence, and take control of the narrative before anyone asks questions. Quiet confidence does the opposite. It observes, listens, and waits. It doesn't rush to be recognized, and because of that, it's often mistaken for uncertainty or lack of authority. Loud assumptions feel convincing because they're familiar. We're used to equating volume with certainty and speed with intelligence. Someone who talks quickly and confidently sounds like they know what they're doing, even when they don't. Assumptions grow louder when they're reinforced by group behavior. If everyone else seems to agree, we stop questioning. The noise becomes proof, even when there's no substance underneath it. Quiet confidence doesn't compete in that space. It doesn't interrupt or dominate conversations to be seen. It doesn't perform certainty for an audience. Instead, it relies on internal assurance, built through experience and repetition. People who carry this kind of confidence often don't feel the need to explain themselves because they've already tested their abilities in situations that mattered far more than the current one. The problem is that quiet confidence is easy to overlook. In fast-moving environments, silence is often interpreted as weakness. Pauses get filled by louder voices. Thoughtfulness gets mistaken for hesitation. And the person who's actually most prepared ends up being the least heard. Loud assumptions thrive in these moments because they face little resistance. This dynamic creates an imbalance. Loud assumptions shape decisions, even when they're wrong. They steer conversations away from facts and towards certainty theater. And when those assumptions fail, they fail publicly, often dragging others down with them. Quiet confidence, on the other hand, tends to surface only when necessary. When a situation reaches a point where performance no longer works, substance takes over. People with quiet confidence usually understand this. They've learned that arguing with assumptions early rarely changes anything. Instead, they focus on outcomes. They step in when clarity is needed, not when attention is being fought over. And when they do speak, the contrast is striking. Their words are measured. Their presence shifts the room, not because they raise their voice, but because what they say carries weight. Loud assumptions also depend heavily on appearances and expectations. They assume roles, ranks, and competence based on surface details. Quiet confidence often exists outside those expectations. It doesn't always look the part. It doesn't announce its credentials. And because of that, it disrupts the stories people tell themselves about who should be in charge. There's a psychological comfort in loud assumptions. They reduce uncertainty. They give people someone to follow, even if that person is wrong. Quiet confidence demands patience. It asks others to sit with not knowing, to wait for clarity instead of rushing towards certainty. That's uncomfortable for many people, especially in group settings where silence feels like risk. Over time, environments that reward loud assumptions become fragile. They rely on confidence rather than competence. They mistake decisiveness for wisdom. And when real pressure arrives, those environments struggle because noise can't replace skill. Quiet confidence, however, is built for pressure. It doesn't crumble when attention fades. It doesn't need validation to function. The tension between these two forces explains why people are often shocked when quiet confidence is finally revealed. The surprise isn't just about capability. It's about realizing how much trust was placed in noise. It's about recognizing how easily certainty was borrowed from volume rather than earned through action. This contrast is a reminder that confidence doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it watches others talk themselves into a corner. And when it finally steps forward, it exposes the gap between sounding sure and actually being right. Respect that's earned, not announced, is one of the hardest ideas for people to accept because it removes shortcuts. Announced respect is easy. It comes with titles, uniforms, introductions, and public recognition. It tells everyone how to treat someone before they've done anything in front of you. Earned respect works differently. It develops quietly, through consistency, competence, and the way someone shows up when no one is watching. Announced respect depends on symbols. A rank on a sleeve, a nameplate on a desk, a microphone in hand. Those symbols can be useful, but they can also be misleading. They create obedience without understanding. People comply because they're told to, not because they trust the person giving direction. Earned respect doesn't need symbols to function. It's carried in reputation, in shared experiences, and in outcomes people remember long after the introduction is over. People who rely on announced respect often feel threatened when it's questioned. They correct others quickly. They remind rooms who they are. They expect deference before dialogue. This kind of authority is fragile. The moment the symbol is removed, the respect disappears with it. Earned respect is far more stable. It doesn't vanish when no one is watching. It holds even when the person isn't present. Earning respect usually takes time, which is why it's less visible. It's built through small decisions made under pressure, through taking responsibility when things go wrong, through giving credit instead of taking it, through competence that doesn't need an audience. Most people never see these moments directly, but they feel the results of them. There's also a difference in how earned respect influences behavior. People follow announced authority because they have to. They follow earned authority because they want to. The first produces compliance. The second produces commitment. And when situations become uncertain or risky, commitment matters far more than compliance. Earned respect often exists quietly in the background until a moment exposes it. That's when people realize they've been treating someone casually who carries significant weight. The surprise isn't just about power. It's about realizing that respect was already there, just not visible to everyone. Others recognized it. They just didn't announce it. This kind of respect also changes how someone carries themselves. People who've earned respect don't chase it. They don't demand recognition. They don't correct every slight. They understand that respect doesn't need constant reinforcement. It shows itself when decisions are made, when trust is extended, when others step aside without being told. Announced respect, on the other hand, often needs maintenance. It needs reminders. It needs public acknowledgement. Without those, it weakens. That's why it tends to be louder. It has to be. Silence threatens it. Earned respect isn't threatened by silence because it was built there. The danger comes when we mistake announced respect for earned respect. We give authority to the wrong voices. We trust confidence without evidence. We follow direction without understanding. And in doing so, we overlook the people who've actually done the work, learned the lessons, and proven themselves over time. This misunderstanding shapes how environments function. In places where announced respect dominates, people perform instead of improve. They focus on appearances instead of results. In places where earned respect is valued, people pay attention to actions. They notice who stays calm under pressure, who takes responsibility, who delivers consistently. Earned respect also creates a different kind of leadership. It doesn't need to control every detail. It doesn't rely on fear or status. It operates through trust. And trust, once established, becomes a powerful force. It allows decisions to move faster. It reduces conflict. It creates cohesion without coercion. People who've earned respect rarely talk about it. They don't need to. Others do it for them, often when it matters most. In critical moments, rooms defer without being asked. Support appears without being requested. Authority becomes visible without being announced. The hardest part about earned respect is that it can't be rushed. It can't be claimed, and it can't be faked. It's built in moments that don't look important at the time, but add up to something undeniable later. Hidden leadership in plain sight often goes unnoticed because it doesn't match the story people expect leadership to tell about itself. We're trained to look for leaders who speak first, take the most space, and make their authority obvious. When leadership doesn't follow that script, it blends into the background. It looks like participation instead of command. It looks like support instead of control. Many leaders learn early that visibility isn't the same as influence. They understand that real leadership shows up in how decisions are shaped long before they're announced. It's present in the questions that redirect conversations, the calm voice that lowers tension, and the quiet corrections that prevent mistakes before they become public problems. This kind of leadership doesn't announce itself because it doesn't need to. Hidden leadership often belongs to people who've learned the cost of being underestimated. They've watched louder personalities claim credit and draw attention while they focused on outcomes. Over time, they realized that influence doesn't require center stage. It requires trust from the right people. So they operate where it counts, not where it's visible. This form of leadership is easy to miss because it doesn't demand recognition. It doesn't interrupt. It doesn't dominate. It listens more than it speaks. When it does speak, it tends to be specific and timely. That restraint is often mistaken for passivity, but it's anything but. It's deliberate. Hidden leaders are usually the ones people turn to when things start to fall apart. Not publicly, but privately. They're asked for advice in hallways, messages, and side conversations. Their opinions carry weight even if their names aren't attached to final decisions. They influence direction without needing their fingerprints on everything. One reason hidden leadership exists is because not every environment rewards visible leadership. In some spaces, stepping forward too loudly creates resistance. In others, it invites scrutiny that distracts from the work. So effective leaders adapt. They learn when to be seen and when to stay quiet. That flexibility allows them to operate in complex systems without triggering unnecessary friction. There's also a misconception that leadership must look the same in every situation. In reality, leadership shifts depending on context. Sometimes it's commanding. Sometimes it's supportive. Sometimes it's almost invisible. Hidden leadership thrives in this fluid space. It adjusts instead of performing. People often confuse hidden leadership with lack of ambition. But ambition doesn't always point toward attention. For some, ambition points toward impact, toward making things work, toward protecting teams from chaos. These leaders care less about being recognized and more about making sure the mission succeeds. The danger of overlooking hidden leadership is that organizations end up promoting visibility instead of effectiveness. They reward those who speak the loudest rather than those who think the clearest. Over time, this erodes trust. People notice who actually keeps things running. They also notice when those people are ignored. Hidden leadership becomes visible in moments of crisis. When plans fail and confidence collapses, the room looks for stability. That's when the quiet leader steps forward, not to perform, but to act. And suddenly, everyone understands why certain people have been listening to them all along. This kind of leadership often reveals itself through reactions rather than announcements. When someone enters the room and others adjust. When a decision is made and no one argues. When instructions are followed without explanation. These moments feel subtle, but they speak loudly. Hidden leadership also changes how teams function. It creates safety. People feel supported without being controlled. They know someone competent is paying attention, even if that person isn't visible. That trust allows others to perform better, take risks, and focus on their roles. The challenge is learning to recognize leadership that doesn't look like leadership. It requires paying attention to patterns instead of personalities, to outcomes instead of performances, to who others rely on when it matters, not who claims authority when it doesn't. Hidden leadership in plain sight isn't rare. It's just quiet. And in a world trained to chase noise, quiet influence is easy to miss until it becomes impossible to ignore. The cost of underestimating others is rarely paid all at once. It accumulates quietly through small dismissals, overlooked cues, and assumptions that feel harmless in the moment. Underestimation often begins with a single thought that never gets spoken, a quick judgment about someone's capability based on limited information. From there, behavior shifts. Attention fades. Respect drops. Expectations shrink. When we underestimate someone, we change how we interact with them. We explain less carefully. We listen less closely. We assume they won't contribute anything valuable, so we stop giving them space to do so. That shift doesn't just affect the person being underestimated. It affects the quality of decisions being made. Valuable insight never enters the conversation because the door was quietly closed. Underestimation also creates blind spots. People become invisible until it's too late. Warnings go unheard. Patterns are missed. Skills remain untapped. Often, the underestimated person sees the problem clearly but chooses not to push against resistance. They've learned that speaking up comes with a cost when no one expects anything from you. There's a psychological toll as well. Being underestimated repeatedly teaches people to conserve energy. They stop offering ideas freely. They wait for permission instead of initiative. Over time, potential is suppressed, not because it isn't there, but because the environment signals it isn't welcome. This is how systems slowly lose their strongest contributors without ever realizing it. The cost shows up in missed opportunities. Someone who could have led stays in the background. Someone who could have prevented failure watches it happen. Someone who could have accelerated progress remains sidelined. Underestimation doesn't just waste talent. It delays outcomes and amplifies mistakes. Underestimating others also damages trust. When people feel unseen or dismissed, they disengage. They do the minimum. They stop caring about results that don't seem to care about them. This disengagement is often invisible at first. Everything still functions, but at a lower level. Mediocrity becomes normal. There's also a ripple effect. When others witness someone being underestimated, they adjust their own behavior. They learn what's valued and what isn't. They learn who gets listened to and who doesn't. This shapes culture. Over time, people stop bringing their full abilities forward because they don't see a reason to. The irony is that underestimation often comes from overconfidence. People assume their judgment is accurate. They trust their first impressions. They believe experience makes them immune to error. But confidence without curiosity is dangerous. It closes minds and reinforces mistakes. Underestimating others can also backfire in unexpected ways. People who are dismissed often become highly capable in silence. They develop resilience. They sharpen their skills without attention. And when a moment finally exposes their capability, the contrast is stark. The cost then includes embarrassment, lost credibility, and missed chances to build trust earlier. In high-stakes situations, the price becomes even higher. Underestimating the wrong person can lead to failure, not because that person caused it, but because they were ignored. The information they held never reached the decision-makers. The expertise they carried was never consulted. And once the outcome is clear, it's too late to recover what was dismissed. This pattern repeats because underestimation feels efficient. It simplifies complex human dynamics into easy categories. It saves time in the short term, but in the long term, it creates fragile systems that rely on a narrow range of voices and perspectives. Recognizing the cost requires humility. It requires accepting that first impressions are incomplete and that capability doesn't always announce itself. It requires creating space for people to surprise you, even when it's uncomfortable. The true cost of underestimating others isn't just what they could have done. It's what you never allowed yourself to learn from them. The cost of underestimating others rarely shows up immediately. It builds slowly through casual assumptions, overlooked moments, and decisions made too early. Most underestimation isn't intentional. It starts with quick judgments about someone's appearance, tone, background, or silence. Once that judgment is made, everything that follows is filtered through it. Their words carry less weight. Their presence becomes easier to ignore. Underestimation changes behavior before it changes outcomes. People stop asking certain individuals for input. They stop offering opportunities. They assume capability has limits before those limits are ever tested. This doesn't just affect the person being underestimated. It weakens the group. Fewer perspectives are considered. Fewer risks are questioned. Fewer alternatives are explored. There's also a silent calculation that happens. The underestimated person notices the shift. They recognize when they're being dismissed. Over time, they adjust. They stop volunteering ideas. They save their energy. They observe instead of engaging. This withdrawal often gets misread as lack of initiative, reinforcing the original assumption. The cost compounds when environments reward these assumptions. When loud confidence is valued over thoughtful insight, people learn what survives. They learn that performance matters more than preparation, that certainty matters more than accuracy. Underestimation becomes part of the culture, not because people intend harm, but because they stop noticing what they're losing. Missed insight is one of the most expensive outcomes. The person who could have flagged a problem stays quiet. The person who could have offered a better solution isn't asked. Mistakes then feel sudden, even though the warning signs were present. They just came from someone no one expected to be right. Underestimation also erodes trust in subtle ways. People who feel unseen don't fully invest. They comply, but they don't commit. They follow instructions, but they don't protect outcomes. Over time, this creates a surface-level functionality that hides deeper disengagement. Things work, but they don't excel. There's a long-term impact on growth. When people are underestimated, they aren't stretched. They aren't challenged. They aren't developed. Skills stagnate, not from lack of ability, but from lack of opportunity. Organizations then wonder why potential never materialized, without realizing they quietly capped it early on. The irony is that underestimation often comes from confidence, not caution. People trust their instincts. They believe experience has trained them to read others quickly. But instincts are shaped by bias, familiarity, and past patterns that don't always apply. When those instincts go unchallenged, they become blind spots. In some cases, underestimation creates the very outcome it predicts. People treated as incapable eventually stop trying to prove otherwise. They meet expectations that were lowered for them, not because they couldn't do more, but because the cost of pushing against dismissal feels too high. And then there are moments when underestimation backfires publicly, when someone dismissed steps forward and performs with undeniable competence. The shock isn't just about their ability. It's about realizing how wrong the room has been. The cost at that point includes credibility, trust, and misalignment. Underestimating others doesn't just affect individuals. It affects decisions, culture, and outcomes. It narrows vision. It rewards noise. It discourages depth. And it teaches people that being overlooked is safer than being misunderstood. The most dangerous part is how normal it feels. Underestimation doesn't announce itself as a mistake. It feels efficient. It feels practical. It feels like moving on. But what it leaves behind is unseen, unheard, and often irreplaceable when actions speak louder than rank titles. It exposes how fragile formal authority can be without substance behind it. Titles are designed to organize, to signal responsibility, to create clarity. But titles alone don't make decisions work, don't earn trust, and don't carry people through uncertainty. Action does that. And when action contradicts rank, people notice immediately. Rank titles tell others what someone is supposed to represent. Actions show who they actually are. A title might demand attention, but consistent action earns it. People watch how someone behaves under pressure, how they respond when things go wrong, how they treat others when no one is keeping score. Those moments define authority far more than words on a page or symbols on a uniform. In real situations, people don't follow titles. They follow competence. They follow clarity. They follow the person who knows what to do when plans break down. When action aligns with responsibility, authority feels natural. When it doesn't, rank starts to feel hollow. People may comply, but they won't trust. And without trust, authority has limits. Actions also reveal priorities. A title can claim leadership, but behavior shows whether someone protects their team or protects themselves, whether they take responsibility or deflect it, whether they step forward or step aside when things get uncomfortable. These choices are noticed, even when they're not discussed openly. There's often a moment when action overrides expectation. Someone with a lower title steps up decisively. Someone with a higher title hesitates. In that instant, the hierarchy shifts, not officially, but practically. People adjust who they listen to, who they look toward, who they believe will carry them through the situation. This doesn't mean rank is meaningless. Rank can create structure and accountability. But without action, it becomes symbolic rather than functional. People may respect the position, but they won't rely on it. And reliance is what matters when outcomes are on the line. Actions speaking louder than rank titles also protect teams from failure. When people feel empowered to act based on competence rather than permission, problems get solved faster. Waiting for authority to speak can cost time. Acting responsibly can save it. The individuals who understand this don't wait for recognition. They move because the situation demands it. There's also a humility in action-based authority. People who rely on what they do rather than what they're called don't need constant validation. They're comfortable letting results speak. They don't correct others to assert status. They correct situations to prevent damage. That focus earns credibility over time. Rank-based authority often struggles in unpredictable environments. It assumes control through structure. Action-based authority adapts. It responds to what's happening rather than what's supposed to happen. That adaptability is why people trust it instinctively. When actions contradict titles, discomfort follows. It forces people to confront assumptions. It exposes who is actually capable versus who is simply positioned. This discomfort isn't negative. It's revealing. It shows where real leadership lies. People remember actions long after they forget titles. They remember who stayed calm, who made the hard call, who stepped in without being asked. Those memories shape future trust. They influence who gets listened to next time, regardless of what the chart says. Over time, environments that value action over rank become more resilient. People take responsibility seriously. They don't hide behind position. They understand that authority is something you demonstrate repeatedly, not something you claim once. The shift from title-driven authority to action-driven authority often happens quietly. There's no announcement, no confrontation, just a gradual recognition of who delivers. And once that recognition settles in, rank becomes secondary to reliability. When actions speak louder than rank titles, it reminds everyone that authority is ultimately practical. It exists to get things done, to protect outcomes, to guide people through uncertainty. Anything that doesn't serve that purpose becomes decoration rather than leadership.